In this video, we'll talk about Azure Application Gateway components. So in the last video, we talked about Azure Application Gateway overview. Here we will further understand about the components which are involved in the Azure Application Gateway. So we have a component called as a Frontend IP address. So the Application Gateway provides a load balancing and web application firewall features for any kind of an application. So as part of that, an application gateway requires a front-end IP address. So during the deployment of the application gateway, it asks us whether you want to have a public or a private. So based on that, the application gateway will have a public IP address or a private IP address. So this is an IP address which is used to receive traffic. So when I type www.acutelearn.com, so when the traffic has to go to an application gateway, what is the IP address of the application gateway? That is the front-end IP address. So this is the IP address which is used to traffic from the internet or from the local area network. And we need to map the DNS domain names to this particular IP address. So if I'm saying a www.acutelearn.com, so that www.acutelearn.com should get pointed to this front-end IP so that the request can reach the application gateway. So it is basically a NIC associated with an application gateway. So we cannot have a multiple front-end IP addresses for an application gateway. During the deployment of the application gateway, whatever the IP address which is being assigned as a front-end IP, so we can have only one front-end IP. Now, if you are talking about 20 different applications you want to manage through an application gateway, all these 20 URLs should point to the same public IP address or a front-end IP address, either it could be public or private. So as we see that in an Azure standard load balancer, for each and every URL, you need a different IP address. But for an Azure application gateway, we don't need that. We can just have one front-end IP address. Then we use a concept called as a listener. Listener within the application gateway is basically a URL for which the traffic should be accepted. So I might create 10 different URLs for the same front-end IP, like www.acutelearn.com, hrms.acutelearn.com, support.acutelearn.com, like that. A DNS records created, but does the application gateway is configured to accept traffic for all the domains? Now, the listener is the one which is going to decide that, can I accept the traffic for a support.acutelearn.com? Can I accept the traffic for hrms.acutelearn.com or sales.acutelearn.com? Like, so based on the listener, the application gateway is going to accept the traffic. So this can be an HTTP or HTTPS. It supports only HTTP or HTTPS. So for an HTTPS, we need to provide an SSL certificate. So in order to accept the traffic, we need to create a listeners. So the listener is just a domain name for which we are going to manage the traffic from an application gateway. So there are two different types of listeners. One is a basic listener. This supports a simple or a single URL or a domain, like support.acutelearn.com, hrms.acutelearn.com, sales.acutelearn.com, where these applications are different. Now support.acutelearn.com might be running in a different app service. HRMS.acutelearn.com might be running on a different app service. Sales.acutelearn.com might be running on a different app service, like different these things. So we call it as a basic listener. And we have a multi-site listener support. So we can have multiple URLs for which the app gateway can receive the traffic on a single listener. Like hrms.acutelearn.com, payroll.acutelearn.com, like leaves.acutelearn.com. Now, which kind of situations we can use that? The backend app service or a virtual machine is serving all these URLs. Then we can create a one single, a multiple listener so that it can listen for hrms.acutelearn.com, payroll.acutelearn.com, and leaves.acutelearn.com. If a backend application is serving the request for multiple domains, then we can use called as a multi-site listener. Based on need-to-need basis, we need to choose whether we want to go for a single basic listener or multi-site listener. A backend pool is just a set of virtual machines or an app services running the same application. Now I have a support.acutelearn.com. So might be I have two app services running the same application. So we create a backend pool and we wrap these two app services to a backend pool. The backend pool is just a set of virtual machines or app services running the same application. So within the application gateway, we can create multiple listeners. We can create multiple backend pools based on the number of applications you want to rotate and number of backend servers running the different kind of an applications. So you cannot create a backend pool within two different app services running a two different application. The backend pool should consist of an app services which are running the same application. If this app service is running a different application, then they should not be part of a same backend pool. They should be part of a different backend pools. So both the app services, whoever the members are going to be part of the backend pool, should be running the same application. So we need a backend pool. A backend settings. So the backend settings defines on which protocol these backend services are running. That is this an HTTP or an HTTPS? On which port number the application is running? Is it on port number 80 or 443? And what is the host name of this particular app service for this thing? And why host name is required? So what happens is there's an application gateway, and this is an app service 1 and app service 2. And this is an app service 2 and an application gateway. So when a user types in support.acutelearn.com, so by default, what happens is the application gateway will receive the traffic and forward the traffic back to the application servers as called as an support.acutelearn.com. Support.acutelearn.com. But if you created a custom domain for an app service, that is fine. But if you have not created an app service with a custom domain, then you will get an error. because this particular app service is an app service 1.azure websites.net. The name of this particular app service is this one. So what happens now when the application gateway forwards the header, but the name of this particular app service is an app server 1.azure website. So you might get an error message because this app service is serving the request for this one because you have not mapped the custom domain. So in the backend settings, we can say that, okay, the request is basically support.acutelearn.com. But when you are communicating with the backend server, use the backend app service name called as an app server 1.azurewebsites.net. Now, in this case, what happens is that the application gateway will modify the HTTP or HTTP header and send the request to the app service that app server 1.azurewebsites.net. Because the certificate, the SSL certificates are binded based on the domain name. So the backend settings plays a key role in the picking up a backend a server name, whether you want the same name, your domain name should be forwarded to the backend servers, or do you want to alter and send it to the backend servers. So these backend settings are required, to which they define the port number, and protocol on which the application is running, and which particular name it is running. Then we have a health probe. So the health probe, so how does the application gateway knows that whether the app service is running or not? We have added 2 app services into the backend pool. For some reasons, the app service 2 is down. But the app service, the application gateway is trying to send requests to the app service 2, but it is not responding. Now what happens? The users who are accessing it and who are being forwarded to the app service 2, they don't get a response because the app service 2 is down. Now the application gateway with the health probe. So by default, there will be default health probes available, which automatically monitors HTTP or HTTPS traffic based on your backend settings. But if you want to customize your monitoring, the application gateway uses a health probe to continuously monitor the health availability of the backend pool members. So this application gateway based on the health probe settings, it continuously go to the app service 1 and sends an HTTP bar HTTPS request and sees that whether there is a response back from the app service 1. Similarly, for every 5 seconds, the health probe can go to the app service 2 and says that hi, then whether it gets a response from the app service 2 or not. So as long as there is a response coming from the backend pool members, then application gateway thinks that, okay, both the pool members are up and running. I can forward the traffic to both the app services. If there is no response from any of the app service, then application gateway feels that, okay, an app service 2 is down. I should not forward traffic to the app service 2. Now, in that case, the application gateway will not forward the traffic to the app service 2 because it is not responding. So it will only forward the traffic to the app service 1. So that way, what happens is the health pros plays a key role. Now, in the health probe, we define the application is running on which port number and what is the page we want to monitor it. So do you want to monitor an index.html page or a default.aspx page or index.php page, or what is that page where the application will respond? So because sometimes the pages or the landing pages or the starting page could be different based on application to application. So based on that, we can customize And the health probe will decide that how frequently you want to verify the health of your backend pool members. So by default, it will be a 5 seconds. I can customize this to the 30 seconds or 1 minute or like that. Okay, based on it. Why 5 seconds? Because I should be able to know as early as possible if the app service is down, the app gateway should not forward the request. There's a reason why by default we'll have a 5 seconds, but how this can be customized. And this health probe is being associated with the backend settings. Okay, based on the backend settings, the health probe will also be monitored. We can combine these two together into one setting. The next is a rule. So what does the rule defines now? So we have a backend pool, the members who are serving this application. The backend settings are defining what are the port on which it is running and the backend host name, and the health probe is telling you whether it's available. And you have a listener for which it has to accept the traffic. Now the rule will define that a traffic received on this particular listener should be forwarded to this backend pool and to this backend settings. Now, based on the rule and the rule priority, the application gateway will process the traffic. So the rule defines that when a traffic is being received for a domain called support.acutelearn.com, it should be forwarded to the backend pool 1, which is running these two members. And by default, the application gateway will use a round robin method to forward the traffic to the backend pool members. So either it can be a multi-site listener or it can be a basic listener. The rule plays a key role. The rules has a priority like a 10, 20, 30 as a values. The least value has the highest priority. So it means the order of processing the rules. Which rule should be processed first? Which rule should be processed second? Which rule should be processed third? If the traffic is not meeting the rule 1, then it checks the rule 2. If the traffic is not matching the rule 2, then it checks the rule 3, like that. If none of the rules are being found or the traffic is being matching to any of the rules, then the application gateway says a 502 error or some kind of an error to the user that there is no application. So once you have the listener created and you have the backend pools created, backend settings and health probes, the next immediate step we need to configure a rule in order to forward the traffic to the backend pool members. So in order to deliver an application using an application gateway, first we need to create a listener and application gateway. Then we need to create a backend pool, that is a set of servers running the application. Then we need to create a backend settings, so that will on which port and host name is application is running. And we need to create a health probe to monitor the availability. And we need to create a rule that any traffic coming for this listener to be forwarded to this backend pool with the backend settings and health probe. And finally, we need to create a DNS record pointing to a front-end IP address. So this is our IP address example I'm taking. So we need to create a DNS records pointing to this IP so that when a user types and support.acutelearn.com, that record should go to this particular app gateway IP address. Then only the app gateway can check whether there is a listener for this particular traffic. If there is a listener, it accepts it. If there is no listener, then application gateway will not accept the traffic. Then once it sees there is a listener, then it checks the rule. Is there a rule which says the traffic for this particular listener should be forwarded to which backend pool? If there is a rule which is associated, then it forwards the traffic to the backend pool members. If there is no rule associated, then it will not forward the traffic. So in order to ensure that to deliver an application using an application gateway, we need to ensure that all these 6 steps are being properly configured. Then we can ensure that the application gateway will handle the traffic.